Wasabi guys, Void here coming back at you all with 10 more underrated commander cards. It's been a long while since my last one, I believe it's been over a month, but I am finally back with 10 more cards that I honestly think should see more play. It's not that people think these are bad, it's that people don't likely know about all of these, so I think it's really important that I get these out there so that more people get to play with them if they don't already know about them. First one we're going to be looking at here is Venser's Journal. This one, I see some people play it and then I see some people just completely disregard it as a thing. You have no maximum hand size, but that's the least great thing about it because the best thing is gaining 1 life for each card in your hand during your upkeep. It is 5 mana, so it might be too expensive for this. Some people might cut it out of their decks just for that reason, which I can understand, but it's still a good card in something like Oloro where you're likely going to hold a lot of good counter spells, removal spells in your hand. Your hand size is going to be rather big, so gaining life for that when you're already gaining life in that same deck, I think is a good idea. Not to mention other life gain decks that want to take advantage of this. Certain decks like Ailey where it helps if you have more life, so it's just something to think about. Not the best card for life game, but a cool little interaction that deals with your hand size. And the next one is Consulate Crackdown. 5 mana white enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you exile all artifacts your opponents control until Consulate Crackdown leaves the battlefield. So it's kind of like an Oblivion Ring, but for all of your opponent's artifacts, which can be extremely deadly. Some of the best decks in this entire format are artifact decks. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned this one before. It feels like something I would have, so I apologize if I am going over a lot of cards that I did before, but hopefully this list is brand new and fresh. I've done at least 18 of them. Consulate Crackdown is amazing. If you're into that type of hate deck where the whole purpose of your deck is to hate on other popular decks, Consulate Crackdown is perfect. Even if you're not, having a mono white deck where you don't always have the best answers for your opponent's decks, something like this is still good against Sol Rings, it's still good against artifact lands, a lot of good stuff that your opponents are holding on to. So making it to where even if it is just temporary, exiling all of their artifacts is fantastic. The next card is Cover of Darkness. This one is a little bit surprising how I don't see people talk about it. A friend of mine actually introduced me to this card a little while ago, back when he was putting together vampires, and I looked at him like, oh my gosh, how come we don't know about this card? You choose a creature type when it enters the battlefield, so if it's vampires, it's vampires. If it's zombies, it's zombies. Creatures of the chosen type have fear, so they can't be blocked by artifact creatures or black creatures, which is insane in that type of deck. We have commander decks where the whole purpose is just tribal. So Commander 2017, if you want to play dragons, wizards, vampires, and the purpose of your deck is dealing combat damage, this is a pretty good card. The next card is Sudden Spoiling. Now this one, I'm a little unsure if I've covered this one before, but I feel like I haven't. Split Second is really powerful. There's very few things that can actually stop this from going off. Only triggered abilities. That's about it. But creatures target player controls become 0/2 and they lose all abilities until end of turn, which is enough to pretty much neuter anything your opponents have going as far as creatures go. This doesn't remove +1/+1 counters. Creatures still have those, so keep in mind if you're using this trying to get around Animar, Animar is still going to have a lot of those +1/+1 counters. What this is really meant for when your opponent is trying to swing out at you in an effort to knock you out of the game, you have a way to take away their best creatures. Your blockers are now extremely valuable. They can be used to kill those creatures because they lose their abilities. Anything like Menace, anything intimidating, Trample, that's all gone. You don't have to worry about that. Really good in control. Then the next one is Tainted Aether. This is a very good card. I think it sees some play in Stax decks, but it doesn't see as much as I thought it would. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, its controller is going to sacrifice a creature or a land. So yet again, this is the type of card that you want in something like Oloro or any good control deck or even Stax deck where you're not playing a lot of creatures, and the whole purpose is to just stop your opponents, slow them down, keep them from doing stuff. That's really what this card is going to do, because very few creatures are going to be worth sacrificing lands and other creatures unless the deck can just recover pretty easily, which very few decks are going to be able to get around this card. They're going to have to wait till they get removal. There are a bunch of cards that do this in blue, but this one is really cool. It's in black, and it's really cool that it forces them to sacrifice creatures and lands. The next card is Subversion. This is yet another awesome black enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent is going to lose 1 life, and then you're going to gain that much life. All of this for 5 mana may not seem like a big deal, but again, throw it into life gain decks, throw it into Oloro decks. You're already gaining life. Why not gain way more life. In 4-player games, you're likely going to be gaining 3 life each upkeep off of this, while also draining your opponents. So life gain, life loss, it really adds up in a lot of those decks. Something like this might be valuable. It's easy to overlook, and I think it's safe enough to where you put this on the field, you may not be a huge target compared to a lot of the other black enchantments you can put in an Oloro deck. So just keep it in mind. And the next card is From Beyond. This is very similar to Awakening Zone that dealt with different Eldrazi tokens. This one is 4 mana, it's 1 mana more expensive, has Devoid, but that's not really that big of a deal. You pretty much do the same exact thing. At the beginning of your upkeep, you get a 1/1 colorless Eldrazi Scion token. The other card just dealt with spawns. These are 1/1s that can sack and give you 1 mana. So there is some value there. Kind of like Bitter Blossom, you're getting some creatures during your upkeep. You're getting advantage. That is very valuable in certain decks, but you also have a way to sacrifice it. You can pay 2 mana and search up an Eldrazi card and put it into your hand. Tutors are always amazing in Commander, and I think it's amazing how this card is kind of flown under the radar. It sees some play, but I think more people are hung up on the fact that it's a 1 more mana expensive Awakening Zone, rather than the fact that you have the potential to throw in something like an Ulamog into your deck and then easily use this to tutor it up. Now, I personally would play both Awakening Zone and this card in the same deck. I think creature tokens, if that's the route you want to go, having ones that you can sack for mana is perfect in something like Mirren of Clan Neltoth, where the whole purpose of that deck is to get sack triggers or just have creatures die. So really decent card, something that I usually consider for other decks like Shattergang Brothers. You get 2 different permanent types. I think that's pretty cool. And then we have Unmake, a 3 mana hybrid black-white for an instant that says exile a target creature. Now, this is a very easy card to overlook, especially in Commander. This card does see some popper play, which is probably why, if it has any popularity, that's why. But this is also the same format where we have Anguished Unmaking, 3 mana to exile a non-land permanent. It's a little bit more flexible. So yeah, that's definitely more powerful than this, but you still get to exile a creature for 3 mana. We have a lot of other 3 mana spells that, yeah, they also deal with other permanents, but they don't exile. This exiles a creature like Avacyn Angel of Hope, something that Mortify, Putrefy can't do. So if you're playing black-white, which is usually where you're going to see this card the majority of the time, give this card a chance. I think it's definitely worth it. Removal is always important in making your deck better. And then we have Skullrend. This card is fantastic. I love it. It's going to deal 2 damage to each opponent, and then they each discard 2 cards at random. This is, for all intents and purposes, a Blightning for each one of your opponents, which is ridiculous. It's 2 damage instead of 3, so there's the difference. But still, in a 4-player game, having each of your opponents discard 2 cards at random, it's at random. It's not their choice. So you could say it's better than Blightning in a multiplayer game. I think it is. You just have so much going on there. I've seen this card in some decks, usually Rakdos Spiteful decks, the type of deck where you want to punish your opponents, deal damage to them, maybe Rakdos Lord of Riots. But you also have that Hand Hate, which is so underrated. 2 cards at random. The fact that it's at random is really the reason why I put this on this list. You make it to where your opponents get nervous. They honestly want to keep something that they really want in their hand. 2 cards, not just 1, but 2, makes it very difficult for them to keep the cards that they want. I absolutely love this card and think it deserves to see way more play in Commander. And then the last card is Void. Yes, it is Void. Now, this card is also one of those that has flown under the radar for a while now, but it's 5 mana for a sorcery. It is not as good as some other removal spells that are capable of dealing with multiple cards at a time, but it's still really powerful. You choose a number, so it has to be 1 number. Destroy all artifacts and creatures with converted mana cost equal to that number. Then you have a target player reveal their hand and discard all non-land cards with the converted mana cost equal to the number. This may not seem like a big deal, but you'd be surprised. Choosing a very common number, just say 4 or 5, a lot of cards are going to bite the dust. There's a lot of good creatures, a lot of good artifacts, and a lot of good cards that your opponents have in their hand that are likely CMC 5. So being able to hit not just 2 permanent types, but also being able to hit their hands is ridiculous. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed these 10 underrated Commander cards. I understand some people have their opinions about this. Not every single card on this list is on the same power level, so obviously some are better and worse than the others. As always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.